Hello and welcome back to Guided Souls. I'm your host, Katie, otherwise known as Guided Soul Katie on TikTok. I'm so excited to be back with you guys for another episode this week. I had the privilege of interviewing Paula Michelle, otherwise known as Paula, at Paula Michelle on TikTok. And if you're like me and you enjoy spiritual TikTok and content creators, there's a good chance you already know Paula. And now you'll get to know her a little bit more through this podcast. There's a lot of beautiful things that she shares and opens up about that have really inspired me. And I hope that by listening to her story today, it will inspire you too. So enjoy. Paula, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I've been so excited to meet you. I feel like I know you, which I'm sure you get a lot. And one of the reasons why I was so drawn to your energy and drawn to your videos is just this feeling of deep authenticity and vulnerability that you bring. And one of the videos that really resonated with me the most, you were talking about when you first started posting and offering readings and things, you didn't necessarily want to be honest with the fact that you were also going through it too, because, who would want to listen to you if you were also going through these struggles, and you kind of overcame that and were able to be open and honest about that. And that inspired me to do that as well. So I'd love to hear more about, coming to that realization and what that was like to put it out there, your own struggles.
Well, thank you. I want to say truly from the bottom of my heart, thank you, because I really appreciate that. Um, I think it's a beautiful thing to be seen, but I also think like as spiritual practitioners is what I tell people. Sometimes we get caught up in this like spiritual bypassing and believing that we have to be perfect. And I got trapped in that for a long time. I really felt like in order for me to be credible, I needed to have all of my stuff figured out.
Mhm.
Like I had to be perfect. And I think what that created, in a sense, was a disconnect between what I was really here to do and what I thought I was here or needing to do, which are two different things.
Mhm.
So I restricted myself a lot from like truly showing up and being very authentic. And it's not that I wasn't authentic, like I've always been myself. But I think for me, as I've grown in self love and self reliancy and autonomy, it really has allowed me to show up differently in regards to my mission and on social media. And when I first started social media, which I believe was sometime in like 2021, so it hasn't been too long on TikTok, but I remember that I was so resistant towards putting a lot of myself and my personal details out there, because as you know, there's like a lot of stigma behind that. Is like it could work on your favor,
Mhm.
but it can also be detrimental because then people know too much about you
Mhm.
and then they assume things about you. So I always had to do like this internal work of kind of like checking in and saying, okay, what is something that I would have wanted to hear when I was first beginning my spiritual journey? What is something, because I feel like a lot of us who have the opportunity to be in the public eye and use this as a means to bring consciousness and awareness to other people, it's a blessing and you can really use that to your advantage. And I sat with myself and I was like, okay, what is something I would have wanted to hear when I was in the crossfire, going through my spiritual awakening, going through that dark night of the soul? And I didn't have anybody to really like guide me through. Like, what are some things I would want to hear? And I just wish that at that time, someone would have told me, hey, it's okay to be you. Actually, it's more than okay for you to be you, because that's how you're going to find your people. And that's how you're going to really leave an impact in this world. Is the world doesn't need perfect. It needs people that are imperfect, showing that that itself is perfect and more than enough. So I really started leading more with that authenticity and taking off that mask of like needing to be perfect. And I think what I realized for myself is who would I want teaching me anyways? Would I want someone that's perfect, has it all figured out and is not relatable, or someone that's very real and can take accountability and say, hey, I'm still struggling too. Like I'm still figuring it out, but we're in this together and we're going to help each other. And this is what life is about. And I realized that's the person. Like I want to be learning from people that are actually making the mistakes. And because to me, that's more credible in a sense. And I think that's important here in this community because there's a lot in this community as well. And that's kind of how I really began. And I think opening up to people has allowed me to connect, obviously, like to you, which is awesome. And I've seen also some of your content as well. So it's great to see people that are like minded, that are also motivating you as well, because it's like, I also need that sometimes on certain days. And actually, more often than not, we all kind of need each other.
Mhm.
So it's refreshing because it's now allowing me, the more authentic I show up, the more authentic people come into my life. And I've been really loving that.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I am also very much figuring it out as we all are.
Yeah,
And,
I think we all are.
yeah, I've been wanting to, discover my purpose and why I'm here and all these
Yeah,
types of things. And I've realized the how doesn't matter so
yeah,
much as, what what I want to do and how I want to make people feel is I want to make people feel seen, valued, and heard. And I
mm,
realized the way to do that is to show up authentically because I believe, that our videos find the right people who they're meant to
yeah,
find and to just have someone voice what you're
yeah,
going through and make you feel not alone can sometimes be so much more powerful than someone
yeah,
who's like, let me lead the way for you. And
yeah,
it was this mind switch for me. And I was trying to stand in front of someone and like lead them. And spirit
yeah,
was like, no, you're meant to walk alongside them.
yeah,
And that to me was like a really big eye opener. And one of the reasons I wanted to start a podcast a while ago, and it just didn't feel right. And I realized I was meant to connect with other people. It wasn't meant to be
yeah,
a solo thing. And this feeling of community has been so huge for me lately.
yeah.
So I really resonate with that.
Yeah, I relate to the community aspect of it. And, I remember when I was doing my yoga training, there we used to talk about Ram Dass a lot. And I think there's a quote that says, like, we're all just walking each other home. And I'm a firm believer, like, it doesn't matter what person you're talking to, you can always connect to them and relate to them to a certain extent. Like, you can always relate to something with someone because one huge thing that we can all connect to is like we're human, we're having the human experience. And actually, yesterday, when I was at the beach, I took myself on a little walk to the beach because I felt very ungrounded. And as I was walking, I felt Source tell me, P, it's a very hard time right now to be human. Just existing and getting up and out of bed every day is already such a big accomplishment. So it's great to be here because I feel like, to your point, you said, I want to know like what I'm here for. And I think that's the $1 million question that like deep in our core we all have is like, when are we going to find love and what is our purpose here on earth? Right? It's like those are the two main questions that people have. And it's like, I don't think you necessarily figure it out ever. I think you do a number of different things and I think you evolve with change and you change with change. But I do think there is that vibrational alignment of feeling at home in what you do. And I think that's what we're kind of all looking for is like, okay, this is still out of alignment. That's still out of alignment. Ooh, but this right here feels good. Like
Yeah.
maybe it's not going to last forever. Maybe I'm not going to be doing readings for the rest of my life. Actually, I probably won't
Yeah.
because it's not inherently sustainable and we're always changing. But that could be the stepping stone. And it's so funny too, because I had to learn this with yoga. It's like I started doing my teacher training and immediately starting to teach full time. And that was beautiful. And I gained a lot of knowledge and experience. And I got a little too attached to that. until spirit's like, okay, we're going to change now. It's not going to be the physical, it's going to be now the spiritual. So I'm a firm believer that things always change and you have to be flexible like the bamboo, you know, kind of like flexible with life. And it's the same thing with relationships, right? Like as you ascend, you grow certain relationships, you grow certain friendships, and you grow certain dynamics, both within yourself and outside of yourself. And I think that's like part of the journey is like you said, it's not so much about like how, when, with whom, it's more so of the what.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what is it that you desire? You want to make people feel valued. Well, you can do that by just being you and listening and sharing your experience. And like that already is validating to hear someone is also lost like you are.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's validating. It's relatable, you know? And I
Yeah.
think that's what after 2020, I think what people are looking for is connection, community, and relatability, just being
Yeah.
relatable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that term you use, the feeling of coming home. And it's something I've definitely been feeling called to a lot. You know, and it almost feels like because I'm stepping into living a life that's authentic to who I
Yeah.
am, my it feels like my higher self is coming home, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're ready, we're coming in alignment. But both of us kind of have different unique challenges right now in that we are in physical spaces that do not feel like home, and they don't feel like home for different reasons. But
Yeah.
I would love to just hear more about, you know, what you're experiencing right now on this trip that you're on, and maybe give the listeners a little bit of background on that.
Yeah, no, it's so great. It's great, but it's very uncomfortable. Is what I tell people. It's like some of the best decisions are when you feel very uncomfortable, but it excites you at the same time because you know that there's growth on the other side that's needed. But I know for me, over the last 2 years have been really difficult. I think some of the most difficult years of my life. And what's funny is they felt more like my Saturn's return. And that's a very tough time. And technically, I'm not on my Saturn's return. So I'm like, yeesh. Like, if that's on my Saturn return, I don't know what is. But it felt like that. It felt like a lot of restriction, a lot of limitation, a lot of self imposed things. And last year, I actually got out of a really, really bad relationship. And I feel like just a series of events that were very life altering, coming from almost losing my life in a car accident and having like a miscarriage and a breakup. So it's like so many things happen. And it was so easy for me to stay where I was at and to completely throw away all this work I've done. But I chose to really come home to myself and say, okay, these things are happening for me, as hard as they are, because they're very challenging. You know, we're talking about loss, we're talking about hardship and heartbreak. Those are like some of the biggest things, like health, that you encompass in human life, and it makes you realize like those are the biggest lessons that you encounter. And I said, okay, these are happening for me. So obviously it's trying to teach me something. Like I'm clearly not getting it. So something has to shift here. Like this is brutal. And, you know, life has this funny thing of like, when you don't learn the lesson, it slaps you across the face even harder so that you actually get it. So I moved back to Florida. I did move in with my parents, and that itself was a huge challenge after leaving and being on my own and coming back. But at the time, I needed it because I was recouping physically from a lot, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I needed all the help that I could get from my community, people. And it was a while I wasn't on social media because I didn't have the energy or the capacity to hold this space for others at all. And it was an integration period for me. So I came back and I did that. I integrated, and it was hard. It was so challenging because your ego tells you like you're a failure, you know, you're coming back, like look at these things. You're 26, like you still don't know what you want, you know, the negative self-talk. And that's really when I learned to just kind of love myself, because sometimes it's kind of like that hangman energy. It's like there's not really much you can do. There are things that you're meant to go through that you have to go through. There's no way around it. And the more you fight your way through it, the more you drown and you hurt yourself. So I took it in, and I realized at some point, I think it was sometime like during the 888 portal, like sometime in Lionsgate in August, that I knew integration period was done. Like I was needing to put myself back out there into the world. And spirit kept pushing and probing, and they're like, okay, you're ready. Like it's there's no such thing as ready, but we're pushing you off this ledge, and
Right.
you need to go. And funny enough, I came to California for two of my best friends were getting married. And I came for their bachelorette, and then I also came for the wedding. And I really, for some reason, felt called to be here. And I was like, that's weird, because I've never really I've always wanted to come to Cali, but I never thought about moving here because, this doesn't seem like my cup of tea, right? So I came here, and I ended up going on a trip into Yosemite and connected even more and found it really beautiful. And I said, in Florida, I felt like I wasn't growing anymore. Like I wasn't meeting friends. Yes, I was growing my business online, but I wasn't, that's not living life, right? Because I always tell people outside of TikTok, that's your reality. Like TikTok is an extension of that for sure, but it's not. Like right now, once these cameras, like these things are off, it's just me here in this space. And that's also a reality. And it's not that I'm not happy in Florida, but as I'm sure you know, you come to a point in life where you know you've outgrown certain things. And it's that leap before that uncomfortable, getting to that other side that's very uncomfortable. So I asked Spirit, I was like, I need a sign. Like, I need to make sure that if I am going to move to Cali, it's not just in my mind. Like, I'm not just creating this because maybe the ego wants that, but maybe the soul doesn't want it. Maybe that's what I want, but not what I need. And there's a difference, right? Like sometimes you want the coffee, but you really need the matcha. It's one of those situations,
Yeah.
they hit different, but one's a need, one's a want. And I kept getting signs after signs after signs. One of the funniest signs ever that Spirit gave me to come here was not only the financial means, as if that was already not enough. I was like, no, I need a sign here, a sign here more sign, like a sign that's a little more signier. And I remember it's very rare for you to see California plates in Florida. Very rare. Because
Yeah.
we're talking about polar opposite ends
Yeah.
of the country. So I remember we were driving back from Key West, actually, to my house in Miami. And all of a sudden, I literally on the spot, I remember I was in the car. I was like with my family. I was so triggered. I was like in my space. And I was like, God, give me a sign if I'm meant to go to Cali. Just like give it to me. Literally 5 minutes go in, a car pulls up on the side and it's a California license plate. As if that was already not enough confirmation. 2 weeks later, I go to the grocery store. And when I park next to this car. It's got a normal Florida plate. But all of a sudden I hear, when you hear like a voice that tells you, look up or look at this or pay attention, like an energy, they had a sticker and it was a California sign and it said, born and raised in California. And I was like, okay, this is too much.
Yeah.
So eventually I was like, okay, I get it. I got to do this. I got to do this. So I ended up booking the stay and I ended up doing it for like over a month. And that felt very uncomfortable for me because, a month is enough. It wears off for the most part. The reality starts to sink in.
Yeah.
I really wanted to get the experience. But more than that, I really asked Spirit, okay, all joking aside, because we love to joke around a lot. I always say that like my guides really do love to joke around and they do have a sense of humor, which what do you expect? Like you're dealing with me. There's a lot of humor in here.
Right.
We need to, right? Because it can be depressing sometimes. And I asked them, I said, no, on a serious note, like, I really need to know what is happening here because I want to know to a certain extent what to not to expect, but what kind of animal am I getting myself into, right? Because Cali is big leagues when it comes to energy. There's a lot of dark, intense energy here, so you do have to be very mindful. Not that there isn't in Miami, but again, this is a different animal. And what they actually shared with me was that I come from a lineage of Lemurian star seeds and Arcturian star seeds. So Atlantis back in the day and Mu and all of that. So a lot of my ancestors, a lot of what they call is like inheritance is here.
Mm.
And as I step into my higher self, there's a lot here for me, whether that is physically, I don't know just yet. I'm only on my third day
Yeah.
on this trip, but there's a lot and there's a reason why I came here. And I always tell people, you're always so protected. So you're not going to go someplace where your soul ultimately doesn't want to take you. So, them sharing these things, it was like a big realization. It came with a lot of like sadness and grief and loss because I could feel the energy from my ancestors. But I also, weirdly enough, feel out of my comfort zone, but
Mm.
also in my comfort zone.
Mhm.
So when I settled, and I think you're going to think this is so hilarious, but I booked this Airbnb and I was between this Airbnb and another one. And they were just right down the street from each other. It's not like it's that big of a difference. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I was looking at this one. I was like, I like this one. Like, yeah, it's a little bit more expensive. I was like, but I like it. It does have a washer and dryer, which it is over a month. So that's nice to have.
Yeah.
And Spirit's like, no, sit and meditate on it because there's something there for you. So I went with this one. I came in, beautiful place, super zen, as you can see, like super chill vibes. But then I look and they have a bookshelf over here. And this was the second day I settled in. So I think it was yesterday I actually discovered them. And I look at the bookshelf and I'm like, I'm not really feeling like home. Like, I don't know if I made the right decision, the second guessing, which we all go through,
Yeah.
even though I know, but it's. And I look at the shelf and there were some oracle cards in the shelf. And they were called like spirit shaman oracle cards. And I grabbed them and I was like, oh, typically I would not touch someone else's cards because to me that's like disrespectful. But I felt like, no, these people, like this place, and they were like calling for them to be used.
Mhm.
So I picked them up and there was so much wisdom in it. And I took that as another confirmation.
Yeah.
You're definitely here for a reason. You definitely chose this place and you chose correctly. And immediately it made me feel more at home. I don't know what it was about that shift per se, but it was like sitting in that uncomfortable and getting that validation and getting that reassurance
Yeah.
that really allowed me to feel more at home and more
Yeah.
at peace. And, settling in has been, little by little, of course. And it's been a journey, but it's gotten better. It's crazy how when you ask for confirmation, spirit always comes through and gives you exactly what you need at
Right.
that moment in time.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. That is so cool. I love that so much. If it's any consolation, I feel like you're in the right place. Like it feels like
Thank
you,
you.
even if you don't feel grounded, it feels like to me, just seeing you and feeling your energy, that it's like an energetic match. So I'm
Thank you.
hopeful that this trip is going to be really beautiful for you. And I made a really big move this year. I left my hometown and moved to a town that I was really feeling called to. It's been the best decision I've ever made. And now I'm back in my hometown for Thanksgiving, and I've never felt more triggered in my life. I'm just like, everywhere
Yeah.
I go, I just see all these things that remind me of like a time when I felt so broken. And so
Yeah.
I'm like in this strange energy of having to work through. I felt like this place was home for so long, and now it does not feel like that at
Yeah.
all. And trying to come back to home within myself and recognizing
Yeah.
that we're not always going to feel like our external environment matches how we feel inside, but we are there for a reason. And there is a
Yeah.
reason why I'm feeling this way this week and things that I meant to work through. So I totally resonate with there's signs, there's things that are pulling you. And I'm so hopeful for you that this is going to be a really beautiful trip for you. And for me, I'm like, okay, we got to get through this week, you know?
I so relate to that too. And it's so crazy because as you're talking to, like, I can also feel your energy. And I can see why spirit brought us together because I feel like you went through a lot up in your hometown. And similarly, that's also with me in Florida. That's why I stayed a little too long in my last relationship because my fear was going back and needing to
Right.
face that brokenness. And I think sometimes like we do have to go back to the
Mhm.
past because there's pieces of ourselves that we have to retrieve that are essential or like things that we have to transmute. And I always tell people like the holidays for me is a mixed bag. And if I'm being fully transparent, I actually don't believe in the holidays anymore because the more spirituality, like the more spiritual you get and the more you dive deep, you realize that a lot of this isn't even based on like a deep core, genuine belief. It's more so about consumption
Mm.
and overdoing. And it's just like a lot of energy and it's challenging always. The holidays are always challenging for me. They do
Yeah.
tend to bring like this sort of sadness, even though I have family and, I'm fortunate, but it's like this sort of sadness. And I think it's from our ancestors, to be honest with you, is like, there's a lot that meets the eye. So I definitely get it, dealing with, Christmas and Thanksgiving and all of these things. And it's like being, because you're also like in close proximity with your parents and your
Mhm.
aunts and your uncles, your grandparents. And it's like all you start to see, the more you heal, you observe where it is that a lot of your beliefs actually came from. And then you
Mhm.
start realizing a lot of those beliefs didn't even come from me and they weren't
Right.
even my responsibility. They were actually just like my ancestors. And, it's beautiful to see, but it's also challenging as
Yeah.
well. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And one of the things that I also really admire about you and that I feel like drawn to you is in a lot of your videos, you'll be like, yesterday I cried for 3 hours, you know? It's just like, I feel like you are able to, it seems like you're able to lean into uncomfortable emotions, particularly when they are not rational or they don't seem rational. And that is something that I'm struggling with. Even last night, I felt so sad. And I was just like, I just had a nice dinner with my family. I'm watching one of my favorite Christmas movies. Like I'm here with my partner. Why am I so sad? And eventually I was just able to say, like, hey, I'm sad. I need you to just sit with me while I cry. And I couldn't even explain why. And I just admire the fact that it seems like you're able to lean into those emotions.
you know, I think, to be honest with you, you're the second person that's told me that. Um, and I never realized it. And at first I was like, what does that mean? But sometimes when we experience sadness, actually, most of the time, it's not because of a pre existing situation. It's actually stemming from like past hurt that
Mhm.
you were not able to process. And I think what I've come to realize is you can be happy. You could be in the best time of your life but experience a little bit of sadness sometimes.
Mhm.
Or I should rephrase that and experience a little bit of sadness sometimes
Mhm.
because there's duality in life. There's happiness and sadness coexist in the same line. And of course, you want to be predominantly happy, but wanting to be happy is also probably what's making you sad because you're
Mhm.
not allowing yourself to really feel what comes up. And I wasn't always like that. Like, I think when I was young, I was really, really sensitive, really hypersensitive to energy. And I do think I did have to build tough skin and put a really tough exterior, like this masculine, like predominantly masculine energy to the point where it became kind of scary. Like, I'll be honest with you, in relationships, it would scare men off because I was very like closed off and very strong. You know, I grew up doing gymnastics, being very competitive. So a lot of these things did play a role into my persona and my ego, my identity, so to speak. And I think as soon as I started healing and I realized like I can't keep holding all these emotions. It's not like I'm going to force myself to cry. But like right now, yeah, I took a trip across the country. I did leave my dog. I left my family. I left my comfort zone. It's okay to cry, even if you're
Mhm.
26, because you're in this place. And yeah, there's a lot of accomplishments. Like you said, why am I sad? Like, how entitled? But it's like one of my friends told me, he said, P, don't invalidate like your feelings. Like, it's valid to, yes, be grateful and still feel some sort of sadness to it, and
Yeah.
say, did I make the right decision? And more often than not, it happens. But I think real love, like unconditional love, is holding the space for yourself through all kinds of emotions. Because a lot of the times it's very easy to love yourself when you're feeling great, when you don't have
Right.
pimples on your face, when life is great and you have money in your bank account. But guess what? It's not as easy loving yourself when you got boogers coming out of your nose because you're crying and you're lost in life and you're kind of like, I look like a sack of potatoes, right? Like, or you feel like that. So I realized like, if I want someone to love me as I am, I have to be willing to be that vulnerable with myself and love myself through it
Mhm.
all. And one of the biggest things I was journaling about, funny enough, last night was, there's a part of me that's so happy, like genuinely happy, like going to the beach, doing this journey by myself and like getting to know myself, dating myself. But I sat last night and I told Spirit, I said, is it bad that even though I am so happy and so grateful, I still feel like I want to accomplish more. And I still feel like I'm not there yet 100% where I want to be. Or is it bad that I, desire to eventually experience this with another and
Mhm.
a lover and share that and share these intimate thoughts and, have that reciprocal energy? Like, is it bad? And they said, no, you can love yourself. You can be happy and still desire to have that intimacy with another and
Yeah.
to share that with another. It doesn't mean, because I think there's like a stereotype on society or in social media that like if you want love or you desire love, it's like you don't have enough of it on your own. And it's like, no, I've seen plenty of people who are well established, have a lot of love for themselves, and they desire to share that with other people because they have so much of it. So it's
Yeah.
like I want to be able to give that, and that comes in due time, of course, because there is divine timing.
Mm.
But I was sitting here and I was like, it makes you appreciate your alone time, but it also makes you appreciate time with those you love as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
that's why I say like things can coexist, and holding yourself and allowing yourself to experience the emotions is just allowing yourself to experience them. Just because
Right.
you're crying, it doesn't mean you're depressed. Just because you're crying doesn't mean that something's wrong or that something's wrong with you. Maybe there's a period of sadness that you're supposed to experience because you're supposed to release. It doesn't mean that there's anything bad per se. And I think when you judge it and you judge yourself and you put like a limiting thing on it, that's when you kind of like, you kind of limit yourself and the experience. And I just learned like emotions just want to be felt. And a
Yeah.
lot of the times when you carry that heaviness in your heart, more often than not, it's grief and you want to cry.
Yeah.
And whether it got triggered from something that reminded you of like 1,000 years ago, doesn't matter. The feeling just wants to be felt. And I realize that when I cry, I feel myself growing,
Yeah. Yeah.
growing in power. And then I feel better. And then it's almost like I'm like brought back to my body.
Mhm.
And it's hard to explain, but it's like I feel better. Because
Right.
sometimes you just need that. You just need a good cry.
Yeah, absolutely. I am a full believer in that. And sometimes I'm almost relieved when the cry
Mhm.
comes, because like weeks like this, I just feel freaking uncomfortable. I'm like, no matter what I do, I just have this like weird energy in me. So I'm almost like, okay, I'm ready. Give me the cry. Like, let's do it. But then they show me times like last night where it's like, we were giving you the perfect opportunity to do that, and you were fighting it. And eventually, I did give in, but even still, I think I held back more because I was like a little bit embarrassed of like, doing the ugly cry, even though I've been
Yeah.
with my partner for over 5 years now. I'm still like, why would I ugly cry right now? And Spirit showing me like, hey, actually that's what you needed in that moment.
Yeah.
And if you would have allowed him to step up for you, he would have, but you didn't even allow that space for someone to
Yeah.
be there for you in that way. And I've always struggled with that vulnerability piece. Even if I feel so safe with someone, it's still so hard for me sometimes to be fully open with the very strong emotions that I feel.
Yeah. And I think that's valid. I think a lot of us were raised like, I just relate to you because my family's very loving. But I also know that every time I wanted to cry when I was young, my family would be like, "Oh no, don't cry."
Right,
Or like,
right.
"Oh, it's fine." No, no. Like, and I realize now, like when I have kids, I'm gonna say, like, no, it's okay. Like, cry. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean you're depressed. So I think like maybe inner child wise, we were taught that like we needed to be strong. Again, it's that masculine energy, like we need to push through. And I think as feminines, that's hard because a lot of the way, like a lot of who we are is that emotion,
Mhm.
is that hysteria. And sometimes being dramatic, like I tell people, it's like you can't take the woman out of the woman. It's like it to me, and I feel like for me personally, it's been hard because even still sometimes like I'm more than comfortable crying by myself. But when I show up to my parents, I feel like I have to, or my family, or even sometimes friends too, is like I have to show up strong.
Yeah.
So, because I've always been that kind of person that like carries the baton, or like I noticed that recently and I shared it, I think recently on TikTok, is like I felt like I've always needed to be that strong person. Like my family looks at me for that. So, if I were to stumble, it's like they stumble right behind me. So, that's a lot of pressure, especially as a kid, to be the light and it's beautiful. But then it creates this like the fear of not because they're not able to hold it, but because they also get sad,
Right.
and it's like you don't want to also overburden them or anything. But a beautiful thing that someone told me a long time ago was P, you can't, it's not a bother to ask people that care for you to hold that space for you, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And to me, that was so healing because I think in romantic relationships, specifically for me, it's been like you're too much
Right.
or that's a little much. Like like people weren't able to handle those emotions. And now I realize, no, I'm not too much.
Mhm.
You just don't feel comfortable enough in your emotions,
Right.
which is understandable why you can't hold space for mine. And
Yeah.
that's okay. But I'm not too much. And I had to go back and reprogram that and say, my vulnerability and my empathy is a superpower.
Mhm.
And for the right people, they're going to be more than comfortable. And it was a beautiful freeing experience. It's like it's not a bother to
Yeah.
ask the people that really care for you for help or for them to hold this space. You're never going to bother them. For the wrong people, yeah, it's going to be annoying. But for the right people, they're going to be like, hey, what can I do for you right now? Like, what's
Right.
going on? Talk to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I have a listener email that I think
Yeah.
will it kind of plays onto all of this duality and the happiness and the sadness. So I'd love to get your perspective on it if you're up for it.
Yeah. Let's do
Okay.
it.
Cool. Let me read it. It's a short one. So it says, why does it seem like the slightest negative thought causes all kinds of negative, unwanted things to happen in your life? And in order to have good things happen, it seems like you have to have strong, positive thoughts for so long. And it seems like you're always waiting for a positive result. It's always about waiting for the good things. And I don't understand that. And when you were talking about your experience, I don't know if it was 2020 or 2021, where you just had like one hard thing after another, what kept you going in that time? And, were you able to have positive thoughts? Were you just feeling like you were always waiting for the positive thing? Or, what's your reaction to that email?
Well, I think the question's really valid. And it makes a lot of sense. And this is why I always say too, like spirituality is not a hip hip hooray, like people make it out to be. Sometimes it's shitty, I'll be honest. Like, and it does feel like you're waiting on something. And it seems like the healing journey is just like continuing. But the thing I've learned very strongly, and it's a hard lesson to master, and I still haven't mastered 100%, is that emotions are energy in motion. So you wanting a good experience and wanting to get out of a bad experience is pushing more of the bad experience because there's this need for you to like get out of it, like this desperation energy. So the only thing the universe is picking up is you being desperate. So it's giving you more desperate. And I do believe that everything's energy. I do believe that the way you feel subsequently affects what comes after. So if you do feel like there's just shitty after shitty after shitty happening, that's kind of what you tend to attract similarly. Now, I do also believe, though, at the same time, life is a balance because for me personally, it's not that I was in a negative headspace per se. It's just that I needed to go through those experiences. And one of the things, the main things I would say to summarize, the answer for this is like, it's all about faith because you can't push your journey. You can't, like, there was this quote that said, wanting a positive experience is a negative experience. Because the thing about life is you're going to have 50% bad days and 50% good days. I know people don't want to hear that. They want to hear that it's like 70, 80% good days, but maybe it won't be. And the fact that there's these expectations in the first place is part of the problem. And it's hard because it's like, as humans, we like, for example, I want this trip to go amazing, but what if I end up crying for the next 30 days? Like, and that's just what I need to experience. What do I do then?
Right.
It does seem like obviously things got better. But again, I needed to go through those poopy moments. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here today. So what I would say is like, yes, even though it's frustrating, the belief that you need to hold on to a positive thought in order to have a positive outcome, I don't think it's more so about that. I think it's more of an internal shift of even looking at something as positive and negative rather than just an experience.
Exactly.
Because like we spoke before, if when you label something as a negative experiencing, you're limiting it, you're judging it. And that's what's creating for you to feel that way and that disconnect.
Yeah.
And it's tough because it's like there are moments where there's amazing things happening after another. And then there are moments where it's a little more slow. And one of the biggest things I've learned is you have to flow with the wave. That's the thing. That's where the faith comes in. And that's where the spiritual practice truly comes in. It's just learning to navigate like the motion of the ocean without getting attached to a specific wave or a specific pattern or judgment. That's also where self-love comes in. Is like, yeah, things might not be 100% where I thought I wanted them to be, but they're exactly where they need to be. And I'm still going to love myself and I'm still going to show up and I'm going to put all I have. It might not be 100% today. It might be 50, but that's the best I can give today. And that's all you really can do is like do the best you can, like the 4 agreements say as well. So it's a tough question to answer because it's like, there's no definite answer for it.
Yeah.
And I feel it. Like I feel that. And I know for me, when I was going through one of the toughest times of my life, which literally did seem like it was like poopy after poopy after poopy, the biggest thing that kept me afloat is realizing that for some reason it was happening for me and it was teaching me something. And when I look now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, wow, how did I miss that? Like, I see why it was happening. They were saving my life. They were trying to tell me, hey, P, redirect. This is
Right.
not where you're meant to go. Like, listen. And it
Yeah.
teaches you to get stronger in your intuition. And I think thanks to that is why I'm here today, and
Yeah.
also crossing paths with you as well. So there definitely is a reason to every event in someone's life, whether they don't see it right now or later, but nothing in this universe is a coincidence, from the people you meet to your mistakes to how you express yourself to when you were born. None of it is a
Yeah.
coincidence at all.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I struggled when I first read that email too. I was like, okay, I feel you. I see what you're saying,
Me
but
too.
also how do I answer this? And I do think what is difficult about that is it feels like very black and white thinking, like,
Exactly.
like a stamp, like I'm going to stamp this thought is positive, this thought is negative, this experience is positive, this experience is negative. And to your point, it's like it just is, and while you were talking, it also kind of was eye opening for me this week. Like, I feel like I've been feeling like this is super uncomfortable energy, and I have to revisit all these, times when I was broken and it was so sad. And it's like, was I broken, or was I just being a human going through something? And,
Yeah.
do I have to label that as a really sad, dark period of my life? Or can I just appreciate it for what it was and how I grew and sit in that emotion and just be grateful that spirit is giving me the opportunity to really examine that again this week for
Mhm.
some reason? And
Yeah.
I never want to promote toxic positivity, but I do think there is something to the gratitude mindset versus lack. And so
Yeah.
I could be sitting here being like, I'm lacking being able to just have this unfiltered joy of being with my family at Thanksgiving this week. But I could approach it as, wow, there's something really beautiful that I'm going to learn this week. And it might be a
Yeah.
little uncomfortable, but I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I have the opportunity to go through it. And it is a fine line between that gratitude and toxic positivity. But I feel like if you can walk it and
Yeah.
acknowledge, not everything is butterflies and rainbows, but I don't have to condemn something as being
Yeah.
bad and negative. That's where you're going to find a lot of healing and finding purpose in the things that
Yeah.
you're going through.
Yeah. I think that's so beautifully said too.
Yeah.
And, to your point too, is like, I do agree with it, like the fake positivity and like the spiritual bypassing, like we say, because yeah, sometimes you have like WTF moments and you're like, oh my
Yes.
God, like what is this? Like, I don't get it. And I'm very open about that on social media because I'm like, look, I'm never going to be like 100%. No, like some stuff just doesn't make sense. And
Mhm.
I'm frustrated and it's part of the ego. And I think everyone has a different trajectory and a different learning and teaching process. But I know for me, one of the biggest things I've been trying to work on is more gratitude because my mind in the past has tended to go, well, this is not working out.
Mhm.
So, well, like, and I hyperfixate, my perfectionism kicks in and I hyperfixate on all the things that aren't working out instead of saying, hey, I accomplished this. I'm here. I'm here for a reason. So let's make the best out of it. I'm crying. Okay. So I'm healing. So sometimes you do have to switch it and it does help, but it's not going to make all your problems go away either because sometimes part of the healing journey is saying, damn, this sucks.
Mhm.
Like, let
Yeah.
let us realize that this is a feeling and it needs to be felt and it sucks and it's part of the human experience. And that's what I tell people is like there is a huge stigma on social media going on. Is like we're spiritual beings and we have to be in 5D consciousness. And it's like you do realize that 3D and 5D have to exist together. That
Mhm.
one can't exist without the other. And if we were meant to be in spirit, we'd be dead. We'd be in spirit, but we're in
Right.
the flesh for a reason. So
Yeah.
a lot of us are learning. And there's been a huge channeling about this recently, as I'm sure you know, is like learning that gorge. It's
Mhm.
the 5D and the 3D and learning the balance, that middle ground. How can I still be spiritual but be anchored in this three? So of this, like not of this world, but in this world.
Yeah.
And it's like you're learning the human stuff. You're learning to manipulate energy here. You don't forget who you are. You actually use that to your advantage in this reality. But it's like you coexist in both. And when people say, oh, well, it's always light and love and all these things, it's like, no, because part of being in this 3D is also saying, damn, that sucks. Ouch. I feel that. Let me feel that as a human and experience it, because that's part of it. You're meant to experience love. You're meant to, I think it's spiritual bypassing to be fine with falling in love, but not wanting to go through the heartbreak. It's like,
right.
they both coexist together.
Yeah.
As much as we don't want to. Yeah.
And your soul signed up for both. It saw both and was like, yep, I choose this path for a reason.
It's like, yep.
So yeah.
It's like, who wants to go to Earth? It's like, next time I'm just going to be like, yeah,
no, I'm gonna hang out here.
I'm just gonna throw up here, throw my feet, and just chill.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, I hope that helped our listener. And I have a few rapid fire questions for you before we wrap up. There's nothing in terms of speed. I just haven't come up with a better name for them. So just so you know.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. First question. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
What I would tell my younger self is you did it. You accomplished everything you wanted and more. Just keep going, P. And I would say, like, always show up as yourself.
Oh, I love that. Okay. In your darkest hours, what keeps you going?
In my darkest hours, what keeps me going, I'm going to say, is the inspiration to help other people and to help them get out of their own darkness as well, is what I would say.
That's beautiful. And you're only the second guest I've had. And they also said, they said their family, but I think it's interesting that 2 out of 2 have now like looked to others as a reason to keep going. And we do want to do things for ourselves, but I think there is a beauty in like when you feel like you can't show up because of yourself, you can still show up because of other people.
Because of others. Yeah. Because you put yourself, it's that empathy. Yeah.
Yeah. What is something you've done recently that you are grateful to yourself for?
Taking this trip.
Yeah.
Taking this trip has skyrocketed me into a different version, more empowered, and really embodying that autonomy that I've really needed in my life. So I'm going to say taking the trip and taking the plunge on the unknown, really.
I love that. What is an area of your life where you are being too hard on yourself and you want to give yourself more grace?
There's a lot of areas. There's a lot of areas, but I'm going to go ahead and say that I'm going to pick 2 because I can't decide on one, but I'm going to say love in the love department for sure, is I need to have more compassion with myself. And funny enough, I feel like I help people find love, but when it comes to me, I'm like, I don't know, I would say that. And I would say my self-development as well.
Yeah.
And just be more kind.
I fully relate to that. I just want to be at the finish line type person. Why do I have to be in the middle of it?
Exactly. We are sometimes our own worst critic because we expect perfection, and it's like we're enough already as we are. That's it.
Yeah. Last question. If you could give one piece of advice or words of encouragement to someone at the beginning of their spiritual journey, what would it be?
This is a good one. I would say one of the biggest things to keep in mind on your spiritual journey is that very seldom is it about perfection, and you're going to be healing for the rest of your life. So you have to be willing to live in between that healing and enjoy life. And one of the biggest things is learning that balance, is learning the balance between when to heal, when to rest, when to go out there, when to open up. And that's what I would say is like, it's not about perfection. It's not about getting to the finish line. It's not a race. It's actually a marathon. So it's slow and steady, little by little, is how you ultimately get to where you want to be. So there's a lot of patience.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Well, Paula, thank you so much. This has been
You.
absolutely incredible. I'm so grateful that you showed up today and shared your
Yeah.
story and your energy with me and all of the listeners. I know there are going to be so many people that can relate to you and this. And where can our listeners find you and how can they support you?
Well, thank you, by the way, for listening, for everyone who's listening. I love that. And yeah, a way to connect with me is through TikTok. And I would say Instagram, but let's be honest, I'm barely on there. I think TikTok is enough for me. So I would say TikTok is a really good way to connect and to see content and to share the space. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to connect, and I'm also wishing you the best and rooting
Thank you.
for you as well. And I want to commend you for stepping up and choosing to do a podcast and bring together like-minded individuals, because I think that's amazing to help other people who are also going on this journey, because trust me, there's going to be plenty more as 2024 comes. It's going to be the
Yes.
year of spirituality again. So it's going to be lots of that.
That wraps up this episode for Guided Souls. Thank you so much for being here today. If you would like to have me and a guest weigh in on a spiritual scenario that you're going through, or you have a spirituality question that you'd like advice on, you can email guidedsoullllc@gmail.com. Make sure that you put podcast in the title of your email so I know why you're emailing, and you will be entered into potentially win a free reading with me. Everything remains anonymous, and you may just hear your email on the pod. I have so many additional amazing guests for you guys to meet that I'm really excited about. So make sure that you're tuning in every week. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you would add this podcast to your queue, follow it, 5-star rating. If you feel called to, it would mean the world to me. And keep going. You're doing amazing, and I love you.